Could you please introduce yourself and tell me what course you teach?
My name is Bill Brieher, and I currently teach MCB 252, which I think is called Cells and Tissues. And I used to teach a class called MCB 493, Advanced Cell Biology. There's a chance that that will be renamed MCB 471, and we'll call it something else because that's a boring name.
Okay.
Maybe cell tissue and, no, cell structure and function. Not that that's any more exciting than advanced cell biology.
I think it's better.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So when is the course that you're currently teaching? When is that typically offered? Fall, spring?
It's offered both fall and spring. I teach in the fall, so if you hear good things about it, you'll want to take it in the fall. If you hear bad things about it, you'll want to take it in the spring.
Okay.
And then the other one, the advanced class, used to be taught in the spring, but we think we're going to move it to the fall.
Okay. And then can you give me a brief overview of what's covered in MCB 252, and then what are the learning goals?
MCB 252, as I see it in my portion, is to learn the basics of cell structure and cell function and how those two relate to one another. There's a learning curve that's involved there for lots of students because there's a vocabulary for cell biology, and we're not born with that vocabulary, so some amount of time is spent learning what an endoplasmic reticulum is, but we do want to then move towards how those different cellular components function and how they work. So the learning goals then would be the basics of cell structure and cell function. That's at least in the second half of MCB 252, which is what I teach.
Okay.
The learning goals in the other course, the advanced cell biology, or if I rename it cell structure and cell function, would look on the surface like the same thing, like what are the structures inside cells, how do we explain those structures, and then how does it function. But I've always felt that my learning goals for the advanced class were much more along the lines like, how do we know this, and what don't we know, and how would you, the next generation, figure it out for us. So much more experimental and trying to look more at like a more modern cutting edge. Look at the discrepancies, right? Like these textbooks that we force you to read. There's a lot of very solid information in there, but I think it's important to realize that what's in these books are sort of really strong hypotheses, and a lot of the information people are challenging all the time, is this right, and sometimes we make observations that are inconsistent with what's inside this book, and then that's an exciting time for scientists, and I think that's what the advanced course is about, or those things we don't understand.
All right, and so then for the advanced course, the rest of the questions will be about the advanced course.
Okay.
So then what is the format of MCB 493 ACB?
The format, there's currently 3 lectures per week. That's what's in the spring. That's one of the motivations for moving into the fall, is to have 2 1.5-hour lectures per week. And that's because the students in the past have requested that it be 1.5 hours per week, because it tends to be sort of the first, say, 30 to 45 minutes is like a lecture where I'm at the board going over different observations about cell function. And then the hope is that students pick up something that seems amiss in the data or something that doesn't quite jive in the data, and then it is supposed to hopefully turn into a discussion where I get to hear from the students what they think about the topic at hand. So it's kind of a discussion-based class when it's working well. I try to ask a lot of questions during that class time, always what do you think, or what should happen in this biochemical reaction, that would make sense for cell function. How is it, for example, that that microtubule dynamics really explain movement of chromosomes during mitosis? Those sorts of issues. So that's kind of the day-to-day form. It's much more discussion-based. The reading assignments, that there's sort of background suggested reading that comes from a textbook, just to sort of brush up on what the basics are. But then I try to assign some papers from the basic science, from the literature itself.
Excellent. Okay, so how are students in the advanced course graded? So is it exams, quizzes, and homework?
Right. So evaluation in the advanced class has thus far been based upon weekly problem sets that you can take home, and then they're graded. I would kind of like to stay with that format to grade weekly problem sets, because I think that it allows students to work and discuss with others the problem, which is much more indicative of how science really works. Not very many of us do science in a bubble all by our lonesome. We discuss it with our colleagues and such, and we read books, and then we work on our answers, we modify them as new results or new information comes to light. So I like that part about it. It's going to get a little bit difficult to keep that format because the class has been getting bigger and bigger, which is great. We would love you to come and students come and take the class and learn from it, but it just gets almost impossible to grade. Students last year will note that I didn't get the problem sets back on time as the class wore on, just because I fall behind on the grading. It's if you think it's like the person's being mean when you ask a tough question that has to be answered in a problem set, I'm the one who has to grade it. So I have all these really interesting, cool answers that I want to sift through, and then that gets hard. So therefore, the point is that it might possibly shift to an exam-based evaluation. If that happens, though, I'm kind of an advocate for open book. So there would still be problem sets to sort of learn that way of like what type of questions I ask, and then the exam would be based on those problems, and minimally there's going to be some big cheat sheet that you can bring in. So we're trying to take the memorization out of the class because you're the generation that grew up with the information age. All the information is at your fingertips. So let's just shift the problem to problem solving.
Okay. Historically, or like in the past, which portion of the class do students struggle the most with for your advanced course?
For my section of the class, so it's historically been taught by two people, by me, Bill Brieher, and then by my friend and colleague Andy Belmont. So in my portion, students tend to struggle the most with the cytoskeleton. And I think the reason for that is that I work on the cytoskeleton. So then I have a tendency of going overboard. That I think two things, I've been analyzing myself on this a lot. I think it's the worst section of the class is the cytoskeleton portion. And it's not the student's fault, it's my fault. I think I get too excited, so then I go too quickly. I think I know it more than I assume the students are on my level, so I don't back up enough and explain the concepts. And then it's just disorganized. I mean, most of my classes are disorganized. People know that already. But it's even more disorganized because I just sort of have this flowing conversation with it. So I think students sort of walk away wondering, what were we supposed to extract from all that? Which is unfortunate because then that's two strikes. I think the textbooks struggle to try to convey how fascinating the cytoskeleton truly is. So then it can come across as quite boring and dry, when actually it's really a beautiful subject about how cells move and it's fundamental to what controls the morphology of cells. Well, then if I mess it up, then that's two strikes, basically. so anyway, so I think that tends to be the hardest part. We're working on it. I'm working on it.
I like the cytoskeleton. That was actually your class is the first time I'd ever enjoyed the cytoskeleton. Most of the time it's super boring.
We're working on it. We're trying. We try. Usually you try harder when you realize you're not number one.
Okay, let's see. What kind of background knowledge do students need to have to take the course? So are there prerequisites, or do you suggest taking a specific class before you take your advanced course?
Busy out here in the hallway. We have some train going by. I really do strongly you have to have MCB 252 just because the discussion there's where you'll learn the vocabulary of what a Golgi apparatus is and basically what it does. And so all of that is assumed in the class. The conversation starts well, you all understand what the Golgi is, and you all know how it works, and then we get into the experiments that led to that, or into discrepancies on Golgi function. For example, is it the case what's the argument for material moving through the Golgi via a cisternal maturation model versus a vesicular transport model? So in order to have that conversation, we need to have the basics down in advance. So 252 is hands down it's just a must. Now, I said it's a must. I'm going to back up on that now. Some students have successfully taken the class without having had 252. That requires then just a lot of background where you have to learn on your own then the vocabulary. And those students have done very well. So I say it's a must, but I guess there's no absolutes in biology. I also recommend 354. Now, I made that recommendation, but maybe I didn't fully understand what MCB 354 is teaching. We try to explain a fair amount of cell function in that sort of basic terms of like chemistry and physics. That's not that we're solving equations in the class. There's arithmetic in the class. There's a little bit there's arithmetic in the class, okay? But it would help to know a bit of chemistry, and it would help to know a little bit about like how proteins, like what protein structure is, and yeah, that sort of bit.
Okay, and so only 2 more questions. What opportunities do you provide outside of class for students to ask questions or get assisted, like office hours, things like that? I
really encourage students to attend office hours, especially in that class. I think I stopped just short of begging. So, I just feel that it's a discussion-based class. Not all the answers are known, but there is a right way, I think, or a better way to do cell biology. And so the more you can discuss how we're approaching the material, how you're approaching cells, then the better off we are. So I have the standard, 2 hours of office hours all the time, but I'm more than willing to meet with students by appointment as well and stay. Those students who have attended office hours will tell you that the problem with attending office hours is not that I'm I keep them here too long. It's like, oh, you're in a captive audience, and then I just go on and on and on, right? So that's the main format.
And then is there anything else you would like to tell about your MCB advanced course, your 252 course?
Yeah, I'll put it one thing with the advanced course for students is that if you want to see cell biology that's still this living discipline where we're still asking questions and we still have new frontiers to cross, then maybe it's the course for you. It's a required course, and this sometimes spooks people. It's a required course for graduate students in cell and developmental biology, right? And it's always populated by them. And so that sometimes, undergraduates might get concerned about that. It's never been an issue. We can grade separately. We usually do grade undergraduates separately from graduate students, but I shouldn't be saying this on camera, but truth be told, the undergraduates typically do better than the graduate students. There's reasons for that. Like undergraduates are more concerned about grades than graduate students many times. So don't be concerned about that. I think the argument to take the class is that it shows that cell biology is still alive and moving forwards, and there's lots to be done. And I think that learning more about cells will do good things for our world. I think it'll help improve health. I think that it'll help us stay in front of agriculture, for example. So there's a lot of new stuff to be learned, and I think it conveys that. Amen.
Perfect.
Plus, the students who take it are awesome. So
yes, yes, they are. They're the best.